Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, mi amigos. A little bit of music there to inspire a road trip or two, which is perfect because we're going to be talking with Austin Coop this morning about, road trips, great American adventures. Beautiful weather here in Kingman, a little bit early spring, but 60 some degrees here today. Perfect for planting a garden. I've got the tomatoes in, the peppers in, the squash in, and the spinach planted yesterday. Austin Coop is, he's a good friend and kind of an inspirational fella. He puts together some top notch road trip experiences for folks. And Route 66 is a big part of what he does, but he's got some other tours that are pretty interesting. We're going to be talking about those as well as the Route 66 Centennial and some automotive museums and, well, a few other things. Hey, good morning, Austin.
Good.
How's things in Chicago?
Things are good. Things are good. Little bit of a head cold, but nothing I can't tackle, so can't complain.
Good. It doesn't do much good to complain because then people want to complain back.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, thank you.
How are things in Kingman?
In Kingman, every day is good. Some are just better than others.
There you go.
I just don't know how long we can put up with this weather. Sunshine and warm day after day, for God's sakes. Just, it's just terrible.
Yeah,
Hey,
we had our first sunny 70-degree plus day on Friday, so that was nice.
thank you. I know you are a busy fellow. You are usually busier than a one-legged man in a behind kicking contest. So I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Like you said, we've been friends for a long time, and it's not work when it's just talking to your friends. So it's wonderful.
Well, road trips, the great American adventure. You have managed to apply your passion, something you enjoy, and share it with other folks. And you put on a really good show for folks. You really provide your clients with something special, and I want to congratulate you on that.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Means a lot.
I know Route 66 is a big focus, but you've got some other tours that are pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
those other tours really were born out of Route 66. So, whether you do Route 66 with a group or by yourself, you come away with this just incredible experience. And I think when you do it with a group, you come away with an even better experience. And exactly what I wanted to happen happened. All the people said, "Hey, we want to keep this going. We want to keep going places. Where else can we go?" I said, "Well, why don't we try a Nashville to New Orleans trip? And then why don't we try a New England trip? This year we're doing a Yellowstone trip." So really just all born out of these people that made these just strong, strong bonds traveling the Mother Road together that now they want to go everywhere together, which is really neat.
well, I work with a lot of different tour companies, and a good barometer of how successful they are and how well they do for their clients and how much they enjoy what they're doing is by the time they get to Kingman, if everybody is, uh, they're ready to kill each other. And they're just not, they've got a permanent frown ingrained on their face. I know it hasn't went well, But when I meet with your groups here in Kingman, everybody is happy, they're enthusiastic, and they're excited. And that tells me a lot about your attention to detail, how you provide a top notch adventure for people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'd say out of the when we meet in Kingman, probably the most on edge person is me because I just know what we've got. I know we're getting ready to tackle Oatman, and we're getting ready to drive up Sick Grooves Pass, and then I also know we got to cross the Mojave that afternoon. So I'm typically the one that is most on edge when we meet up for lunch in Kingman.
Yeah. Yeah, I just was up in Oatman. That they've had a fire up there, burned up a couple
Yeah, I saw
places, and
that.
Oatman. I don't even know what to say about Oatman.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's you can't describe it if you've never been there.
but now you do the driving tours, the self drive tours, convoy type, and then you also do coach tours.
We're doing one bus tour this year. And then next year, we're just focusing on the caravans. Nothing against the bus tour. In fact, our last bus tour is filled up. So I went from a 40 passenger bus to a regular full size 56er. Uh, so it's just there's other people in that space, other operators that do an okay job, and my caravans just seem to be getting busier and busier. So it was um, just one of those focusing my time. So 2025 will be the last year of the bus tour. But I love my bus itinerary. It's the same exact itinerary as the caravan, with the exception of uh, instead of going to Oatman, we detour to Vegas for
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. You can't quite get that bus up there.
Well, that would be a thrill seekers tour, taking a
Well,
bus through.
it was you that told me that Trailways used to run that road.
Yeah, Pickwick bus lines, which became Greyhound about 1931, 32. Pickwick used to run that. I don't know how long. I know when they got into Greyhound, late 30s, and the buses got bigger, they discontinued. But that big curve going into Gold Road was sharp enough that the buses would back up the hill heading eastbound. They would back up the hill into that little clearing to make that curve. And that had to be a thrill ride and a half.
Oh, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I had that happen to me one time in Montana. It was a custom trip, and the people that at my old company that set it up did not do their due diligence. And next thing we know, we're going up this mountain road. And by the time we got to the top, I literally had people crying on the bus. The bus had to make several 5 or 6 point turns. And thank God, if you've ever done these coach tours, most of the drivers are just salt of the earth, and
Yeah.
these drivers, they know their corners, they know where their wheels are. Their ability to drive those big coaches is really something. But it was bad enough that I told the vendor at the top when we got up there, said, "We're bringing everybody down in your personal cars, and then the bus driver and I will ride down, so that we're the only two that fall off the mountain." But that was a wild experience. I had some feedback from my company after that one.
You know it's going to be a challenging tour when the bus driver asks you to sign on the line where it says beneficiary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just never good. Like say on the caravan tours, you have people rent cars, or do they bring their own vehicles, or
Yeah, so I've seen this done every which way, and I tell people it depends a lot on what you want to get out of the experience. Some people want to have pictures of their car on Route 66.
yes,
Some people want the experience of driving their car. Other people, that's not such a priority. Maybe time is more of an issue. So, especially if they're still working, they can rent a car in
mhm,
Chicago, fly home from LA, and, that's no big deal. I've had people drive their car, and when they get to LA, the truck and trailer comes and gets it, and they fly home. So I tell people the only one that gets a little tricky is when I have people that want to do it in their classic car. Um, if it's a classic car, I just have a conversation. I say, have you done, have you done a long trip in this car?
ah,
If you've only taken it to local car shows in the summer, It's a big difference between driving, 2,400 some miles and then driving back. Does it have air? Does it, will it be comfortable for you? Are you mechanically? So I just have a conversation typically.
Yeah.
So it just depends. But I've seen it done every which way you can imagine.
I've got a young fella. I had him on the program a couple of weeks ago, and he's a really interesting fella. He's got a business up in New Hampshire, Tebow Barnes. He's obsessed with Model A's and Model T's. He's now bought himself a couple Stanley steamers that he's learning
Oh
and
boy.
taking trips with them in the mountains of Vermont and New Hampshire. But a few years ago, he did during COVID, he wanted to do Route 66, and he did an 8,100-mile trip in 3 weeks in a 1930 Ford sedan.
Wow.
And he's got it in his head next year. He's looking at different options, and we talked about it. He would like to organize a caravan for Model A and Model T owners on Route 66 next year. Start
Wow.
in Detroit, Greenfield Village with the auto museums across southern Michigan, and then Route 66.
He's a braver man than me, and much more mechanically savvy.
Ah, I'm an adventuresome person, but there's a fine line there between adventuresome and possibly having mental issues. It's you.
uh, well,
Yeah,
the stuff you see, I was in Winslow a couple years ago, and we're doing the corner and all that fun stuff, and we see a bunch of like Honda, what were they, 80s or tiny bikes, much
uh,
not much bigger than a mini bike, and those guys were doing the whole thing on these motorcycles that won't go more than about 35, and so you see it all, you see it all.
Route 66. It's always been the road of dreams, and the dreams in the era of Renaissance have boy, they're different. And I have a front row seat here in Kingman to some of the never ending parade. I've seen a group with a couple of years ago that did microcars. People from all over the world shipped their microcars, like Fiat Pandas and BMW Izettas. They did Route 66. I saw one group. Anybody was welcome to join them, provided you had a motorcycle manufactured before 1916. And I just, yeah, it's astounding what people do with Route 66 stuff.
It really is. It really is.
And I have a feeling, even with the situation with international tourism, I still think that 26 being the 100th anniversary of Route 66, the 250th anniversary of the United States, I think next year is going to be something pretty spectacular on Route 66.
Yeah, I really hope so. I know that demand on our end. Normally we would not have our dates for next year already published, and
Right.
we just could see the pent up demand for it. And a great example of this is we're doing two special trips in 26 that are only for people that have done my trip before. So it's a special like alumni tour. Both of those sold out within a week. I think the second one has a little bit of space on it, but it was um, people were waiting for me to announce when those dates were gonna go. Um, in fact, the demand for it's so high. The itinerary I don't even have finalized yet, and people said we don't care, we're in.
I've had that quite a few companies. I help put together itineraries for some companies occasionally, and I did one for a Norwegian company that's doing a bus tour next year. But of course, the international is kind of a edgy situation right now. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Um, but yeah, the centennial. A lot of communities are gearing up for this and making some pretty heavy plans. And like this fellow with the Model A, Ryan, I'm getting a lot of inquiries from people that are looking to do Route 66 in some very unusual manners with vintage cars and bicycle trips along Route 66 and all kinds of things next year.
Yeah, I think it'll be, with our tours, it's going to be hard for me to, I kind of have to set the dates and then just
Mhm.
see what is happening community to community as we
Yes.
go. So I tell my guests, we may not be able to hit, all these little town festivals and things like that. But I said there will definitely be a vibe. There will
Yes.
be, um, like you said, people doing it in unique ways. I think it will definitely be something special.
Well, you do a great job on this, and I know you'll these people have an adventure with you that they'll never forget. And if anybody is interested in doing Route 66, but is kind of doesn't want to do it on their own, I really I give out your address a lot because a group setting makes people feel a little more comfortable sometimes, and having somebody that knows where they're going kind of helps
Yeah,
too.
I always tell people I'm, not a very good salesman because I always say, there's so many different ways to do 66, and you should do it in a way that makes you feel most comfortable.
Right,
Prime example would be somebody like my uncle. If my uncle's buying a car or a boat or building a house, he's more interested in the research going into it, and then he gets the boat and, cool. But he loves the research and he loves that part of it. And I think that there's people that's part of the fun for a vacation for them is planning it, and that is actually fun for them.
right.
And I always tell people, hey, go for it. Get Easy Guide, start working through Easy Guide. And if I get somebody that maybe is a little bit on the fence about that, I say, go ahead and get Easy Guide, start looking at it. And if you start to get anxious after about 5 pages, you give me a call and come on my trip.
That's the
You
spirit.
know, so it just depends. Everybody's different, but I try to do a trip that I feel like is a good snapshot of what Route 66 is all about.
Well, I think most people, and especially if they talk with you and look at your website and they do any kind of research at all, they realize that, first of all, Route 66 is unique. It's a highway, but yet it's also a destination. But
Yeah.
you can't see it all. You can't take in every festival. You can't see every museum. You can't eat pie in every restaurant. God knows I've tried. You just can't do it. And when
Yep.
people ask me how long it takes to see Route 66, I tell them I don't know. I've only been doing it since 1959.
You're
Uh,
exactly right.
and it's constantly changing. It's always
Yep.
evolving.
Yep.
You also do a Southern Michigan museum tour, automobile museum tour.
Yeah, so it's that's a new tour that we started last year. We're getting ready to go on it here in about 3 4 weeks. Starts in Indianapolis. I just love this trip. Originally wanted to do it as a bus tour, but everybody said no, we want to drive, and so I switched it to our regular caravan format. But starts at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and basically does the track tour and the museum, which the museum just reopened after much needed renovation. So I'm very excited. And then we head up to Auburn, to the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum, National Auto and Truck Museum, and the early Ford V8 Museum. If you've been to any of those, they're just all incredible in their own different way. The Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum is a work of art that houses works of art. I mean, it really, the factory building that it's in is all Art Deco. It's just a special place. And then, of course, run up to Dearborn and do the Henry Ford and the Village. And then this year we're going to run over to Roush and look at some NASCARs. And then the Gilmore, which the Gilmore is if you've never been to the Gilmore, it's hard to explain. It's just a campus of incredible cars. You'll go building to building, and it's every building's incredible. One of the cool things about the Gilmore is they also give free classic car rides around the campus.
Hmm.
So you could spend all day just tooling around in volunteers vintage cars. And then we run to actually a Air and Space Museum in Kalamazoo, the Air Zoo. and then run down to Studebaker in South Bend. Um, but I think some of the hidden gems on that trip, believe it or not, in the town I grew up in, so Muncie, Indiana, a little bit outside, there's a little suburb called Yorktown. There's an old filling station, and it used to be called Pete's Grocery, and it just reminds you so much of Route 66. I used to live right near it, and we would ride our bikes down to get penny candy off Old Pete. And Pete's been long gone now, and the place kind of sat there for a long time until some people had the foresight to turn it into a diner. Um,
Ah,
and they're normally closed on the day we go there, but they're opening for us for lunch. And it just, again, most of my guests on these trips have done 66 with me. It just takes them right back there. Um, and then we go up the street, up the road a ways to Fairmount, Indiana. Now, Fairmount, Indiana is where James Dean grew up.
oh,
So he was raised by his aunt and uncle out on a farm there, and they have a town museum um, that would blow your mind. This museum has uh, everything you could ever imagine. They've got cars, motorcycles of James Dean's, and then they've got stuff like his address book, which or his contact book, and it'll be open and it'll say plumber, electrician, Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, it's stuff from when he played basketball in high school, the knives that they used in the knife fight in Rebel Without a Cause. It's just this treasure trove of really neat, late 40s, early 50s Hollywood history. It's really something.
it's this, that's one of the things, whether it's Route 66 or Indiana or wherever, you stumble into these little museums. There's one over in Spring Arbor, Michigan, near Jackson. The Ye Old Carriage Museum, Ye Old Carriage Shop. Uh, Lloyd Ganton. It's a private museum he opens for groups, schools, but he has collected. Jackson, Michigan had over 25 automobile manufacturers, and Lloyd is probably close to 90 now. And he made it his life's mission to collect vehicles and memorabilia from all of those companies. And then he's also, Jackson was also home to Spartan Radios, a pioneer in television manufacturing, and Spartan automobile horns. So he collected all the different things manufactured in Jackson. And he has supposedly one of the world's largest collection of Coca-Cola memorabilia in a functional soda fountain. And also gas station memorabilia, all kinds of quirky, weird gas pumps. And here this is just in this little town of Spring Arbor, Michigan. This absolutely amazing little museum. We have Margaret with us this morning. She's with the R.E. Olds Museum in East Lansing,
Oh,
Michigan.
nice. Nice.
Yeah. And so, yeah, talking car museums. The Gilmore, yeah, that's great. I was there for a gathering of checker owners and enthusiasts some years ago. The Auburn Cord Museum, my gosh, even if you're not a fan of automobiles, those are rolling sculpture. And like you said, the facilities, the old corporate headquarters, the showrooms, just an architectural masterpiece.
Yeah, and the museum next to it there, that National Auto and Truck Museum, is wonderful and eclectic in its own right. They've got one of the old GM Future Liners,
Yes.
and I don't want to promise this to anybody that comes on a future trip with me, but last year when we were there, the volunteer just goes, "Well, I've got the keys in my pocket. Do you guys all want to sit in it?" And we're like,
Oh,
"Yeah, of course." In fact, that's where last year I sent you a picture of a checker limousine,
yes.
stretch checker. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is neat. Those future liners are pretty impressive.
Oh,
Pretty darn
absolutely.
impressive.
Yeah. And, it's rare to see one because there's
Yeah.
just a handful of them left, but to sit in one, that's even more special.
And you mentioned Greenfield Village, the Henry Ford Museum. That's a complex that could be a trip in itself.
Oh, absolutely.
You could
Absolutely.
spend days there.
It's truly amazing. When you start to learn the history, I always encourage people through in that village, whether it's, because they offer Model T rides, but for even less money, I want to say it's like 75 cents. They've got some old Model A, like buses that you can also do rides in. And I just really encourage anytime you go to that village to do that because they'll tell you about the buildings as you're driving around, and the lengths that they went to bring in some of these very famous buildings or just buildings from Henry Ford's childhood that were special to him. It truly is an unbelievable place.
Well, Harvey Firestone, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, pooling their resources to create this time capsule of the world that was being transformed by what they were doing. It really is a spectacular living time capsule.
Absolutely. Yep.
And you're one up on me. I've done a great deal of travel in this country, but I've never made it to the Northeast, and that's something you're doing now for fall tours.
Yeah, our New England tours have really I've gotten them to a spot where I really really enjoy it. Obviously the scenery is going to take care of itself. But the unexpected thing up there is they've got some phenomenal car museums in New England.
Yes.
Phenomenal. One talking about your buddy with the steamer, the Seal Cove Auto Museum is kind of on the main big loop that when you do Acadia National Park. And very long story short, this gentleman had collected an unbelievable collection of brass era cars and early motorcycles. Some of them very famous, and it's just this little hidden gem. Uh, there's just two or three really, really great car museums up there that we're able to sneak into that trip. And then just each little town, each New England town has its own charms to it. I tell people I could do that trip all over again and just slide everything from one town to the next town, and you could do that for years and still not see all the little towns up there.
I'll send you Ryan Thiebult's contact information. He lives, I think, in Milton, New Hampshire, and he has quite a collection of Model A's, Model T's, now his steamers, and he's always hosting events at his property. Uh, in the wintertime, he gets people together, these Model T snowmobiles, and they go out and have races on the lakes.
Oh wow.
Uh, he's always got something going. One of his latest acquisitions that he's going to be putting on display, he bought a 1913 Model T Ford that had been put away on blocks in the garage since 1923. Basically, a one family owned automobile, totally unrestored 1913 Ford. And he's always turning up something of interest. I'll put you in contact with him.
Yeah, please do. One other neat thing we do on that New England trip is the Von Trapp Family Lodge
Ah,
outside of Stowe, Vermont. And we do a little tour, and then they show kind of a video and give you the history of the family, talk about Sound of Music and all that stuff. And then at the very, very end, one of the actual Von Trapp granddaughters comes out and talks to the group. It's amazing to learn that family history is wild. Uh, beyond just what the movie depicts, their actual life story is truly remarkable. So that's kind of a neat experience as well.
I recently stumbled on, and I've got to pin this down, but I stumbled on a story about the Von Trapp family that has a Route 66 connection.
Really?
That Via de Quibero out in Quibero, New Mexico, apparently had kind of a resort connection, a little getaway for place, and
You know,
a couple of the Van Trapps apparently visited there often.
they did. In fact, some of the family had a lot of ties to New Mexico because I asked the granddaughter after the presentation. I said, they talked about some of the family going to New Mexico all the time or living in New Mexico. I said, Do you remember where? Because I was trying to make that connection. So thank you for closing that loop for me.
Yeah, like I say, I haven't been able to pin down a lot of this. It's kind of vague, but persistent. I know Vivian Vance, who played on the Lucille Ball show. She kind of grew up in Albuquerque and had a ranch in that area, via the Corbero. And when they did that episode of I Love Lucy, they traveled Route 66. Of course, they mentioned Albuquerque. But Desi and Lucy visited there often and stayed at that Via de Corbero. And that ties in with, I've heard that a lot. I haven't verified it, but it ties in with Vivian Vance. And there's a couple other celebrity associations. And it's kind of odd because basically it's even in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, it's kind of a remote location.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Uh, and you're doing Yellowstone this year. You're expanding this out to the Yellowstone National Park.
Yeah, so we're doing so all of your major like bus tour companies run what they call like your Salt Lake City to Rapid City. So your Jackson, Tetons, Yellowstone, Mount Rushmore, etc. And so I that had always been on my radar as something that I wanted to do. I used to have years where I'd go there 5 or 6 times a year. Um, and so I'm giving it a try this year. Two departures, they're both pretty much sold out. So I think that's going to be a trip that happens every year. And the obviously the scenery is incredible. I'm also excited. If you've ever been out around the Black Hills in a car, it's some of the best driving. The roads, the Peter Norvik Byway, Needles Highway, some of these roads around Mount Rushmore are just remarkable.
Nice.
Um, Now, the big challenge there was I knew I didn't want to have a caravan trying to go around Yellowstone because I knew we wouldn't be able to park. Um, and so what we're doing there is contracting a vendor from the park to take us around in minibuses.
Wow.
So we'll do a little bit of Yellowstone itself in cars, where I know we can get in parking wise, but then I'll farm that our full sightseeing day in Yellowstone. I'm going to farm that out so we don't have to stress about driving, because as much scenic driving as there is on that trip, the Yellowstone Loop in terms of driving is actually not that scenic. Um, and now you're really more interested in the stops you make with the geysers and the hot pots and things like that, as well as wildlife. But in terms of like fun driving, no, it's just more battling traffic. So we're gonna
Yeah.
let some buses do that for us.
Most of the parks, that's a real problem. The traffic kind of takes the enjoyment out of it. I It's another story for another day, but I lived up in Newcastle, Wyoming for a bit, and that Black Hills country is gorgeous. And the first time I went to Mount Rushmore, I was actually a little disappointed. It's a spectacular sight to see. It's pretty amazing, and I think one reason is the drives, the countryside, the mountains are so spectacular. Mount Rushmore just doesn't quite compare
Yeah,
for
it's
me.
yeah. I think it depends. Uh, Most people say that. So, like when I was running that for the bus tour company I used to work for, people had heard how unimpressive it was to the point that they were impressed. They had such low expectations going into it. The story behind it, I really encourage everybody. There's a wonderful American Experience PBS documentary about Gutzon Borglum and making Mount Rushmore. And if you want a character, if there ever was one, Gutzon Borglum, you could we could talk for hours about what a fascinating, bizarre, bizarre guy he was. Um,
It's the fascinating, bizarre, and eccentric people that, well, they add the seasoning to life, don't they?
I think my favorite, the just one Gutzon Borglum story I'll tell is, when he came to town. he kind of expected everybody to kind of worship him for what he was doing. And the story goes, he pulled in to get gas one day, and the guy came out of the station there and said, "I'm going to need you to pay before I pump it." And he said, "Don't you know who I am?" He said, "I know exactly who you are. That's why you need to pay before you pump it." Because he had such a reputation of not paying his bills. So I just always got a kick out of that.
I won't try to pronounce his name. I'll find it here. It's one of the Central European names. They use all the letters of the alphabet twice and no vowels. Uh, but there's a Kingman connection to Mount Rushmore I found recently. One of the fellows who helped with the design sketches for Mount Rushmore, he was a sculptor, and he did the World War One doughboy statues that appear. They were pretty popular. About 30% of World War One memorials use the doughboy statue that this fellow designed. I'll have to pull his name up for you. And we have
Well,
one.
there's
We have one
sorry,
of
go
those
ahead.
in Kingman.
Oh, really? But yeah, another Guts and Borglum connection with Route 66 is if you've ever been to Lincoln's Tomb in Springfield,
Yes. Mhm.
the first thing you walk up to is a replica of a bust of Lincoln that was done by Borglum. It's the famous one where you rub his nose for good luck.
Yeah, I've never understood that. Um, it's the stories and that's one of the things that make your tours really special. Is it's more than just drive, eat, and see. You encourage the people to discover the stories. You bring these places to life. You give them context. You give them meaning. And I think that's really what one of the things that makes your tours so popular.
And I appreciate that. I'd say, and part of that's just over the years. Like I would say when I was younger, when I first started doing 66 about 10 years ago, I didn't know much about Fred Harvey. And all it takes, sometimes you just get your hands on a book and it just opens your eyes to so much. And I've been so lucky between your books and there's a book called Rising Tide that talks about the Great Mississippi Flood. I believe, gosh, what was that, the 20s or 30s? But talks a lot about Eads and the Eads Bridge in St. Louis, and a lot of stuff named after Eads around St. Louis. So that you get these little pieces of backstory that you can start to tell people. And for me, when I read Appetite for America by
Yes.
that, I you're reading this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's all along these places we go. You know,
Yeah.
from Fred Harvey staying in the Palmer House in Chicago, which is where we stay when he would meet with Pullman, to obviously La Posada, La Fonda, um, Barstow, all of these. And so now by the time my group gets to you in Kingman, most of them are just Fred Harvey fanatics. A lot of them will get the audiobook and listen to it like on their drive. But you pick up these little things and it makes it come alive.
Yes. That book, Appetite, that you mentioned, I wasn't. I knew a bit about Harvey. That book, I highly recommend. I actually was gifted that book, believe it or not, by the owner of an Australian tour company. He gifted that book to me, and yeah, what a fascinating story. Kind of a tragic story, but fascinating.
Yeah, really. I tell people the first day of our trip, I tell them a little bit about, because we talk about the history of the Palmer House at our welcome dinner, and I just kind of plant the seed. I was like, Fred Harvey's going to pop up again the rest of this trip. Even other little things, when we go to Miami, Oklahoma, and go to the Coleman. My first real exposure to Route 66 was I went to Miami of Ohio, and we did a business consulting trip out to Miami, Oklahoma, and worked with the tribe to do some due diligence on a deal that they were doing. Well, that was the first time I got to go to the Coleman. That was the first time I was kind of exposed to some of that. And so now to go back and I can tell them a little bit about, how the tribe ended up in Oklahoma. And then, when it was a book and now a movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, I can talk to everybody a little bit and explain, just what oil meant to Oklahoma and what it meant to some of the tribes. You just get all these little. That's what makes 66 so rich, is that there's every period since it was built. Every period has all these different stories and different through lines. It's really remarkable.
Yeah. And, all the highways have that, but there's something really special about Route 66. And what you're describing there, that's something you bring to your tours. You have an insatiable curiosity about things. And excuse me, when you get with your groups, you're infectious enthusiasm and curiosity. Uh, it just really gets people fired up about these things.
I appreciate that. I appreciate
Uh,
that.
I've all my life I've collected stories and I love stories about people. Just recently, I interviewed a fella, well, a little while back here, whose family had a produce market in Needles in the 1930s, and this gentleman was pulled out of school at 16 years of age to help the family business haul produce from Los Angeles to Needles. This would be in the 1930s. And then they contracted with Central Commercial in Kingman, Oatman, and Gold Road to haul produce. And then his dad hatched up a brilliant scheme of big trucking companies couldn't get through Oatman. So they had to make a big detour down to Phoenix and around. So what his dad did was have a ton and a half and 2-ton Ford flatbeds available in Needles and Kingman. And for a fee, they would offload in Kingman, haul it to Needles, and save you that trip.
Oh wow.
And he went on to a 55-year career as a long haul truck driver. But
Wow.
his stories about truck driving in the Mojave Desert on Route 66 in the 1930s and 40s as a teenager was pretty extraordinary.
I just when we drive, um, leaving Oatman as we're driving towards like Golden Shores, um, it's I just tell people, I said, can you imagine doing this in the 30s? Can you wrap your head around that? Because they're all looking at their cars, at their thermometers, and they're all saying, oh, I've got 105, I've got 110. They're all looking at their tire pressure because their tire pressure has gone up by 10, 15 pounds. And I said, just imagine if you were, I think about the Dust Bowl and trying to go through there with everything you own strapped to your truck, trying to get it to work. I just can't imagine that level of toughness.
No. But you do what you have to do. When I was talking to Ryan here a few weeks ago, the fellow with Tebow Barnes, like I say, he's from New Hampshire. He had never been west of the Mississippi until 2020 when he made this trip. And he made this trip in his Model A in August. And he was talking about going through Oatman and Needles. And he said, I opened the windshield to get a little air. And he says, it was just like somebody had a hair dryer blowing it in my face.
That's the only area that I've been in my life where normally a breeze, it's a hot day, but there's a breeze. You get some relief from that breeze. It's the only place I've ever been where the wind is hot,
Yeah,
where it's not any sort of relief.
no, I'm one of the dry roasted nuts. I live in this desert country on purpose, but that Colorado River Valley and out in the Mojave Desert come summer, my gosh, I tell you that's just downright brutal. I was speaking at an economic development deal, tourism and economic thing for the Chamber of Commerce a couple of years ago in Needles, and it was 1:26 when I was down there, and the lady was all excited. She'd sent a photo to the Weather Channel that they had picked up. The bank thermometer the week before had showed 132 on the bank thermometer in Needles. And they were hoping they were going to break a record, but they didn't. And I just thought, God, and you live here on purpose. It's
Yeah, it's well, for most of that area, any sort of water that you want to drink has to be, tanked in.
yeah,
It's just a very, very unforgiving place.
yeah. On your tours, do you do much around Tucumcari or Las Vegas, New Mexico? Or
So unfortunately, Las Vegas, no. Tucumcari, absolutely. So Tucumcari, I would say, if Miami, Oklahoma was my first experience on 66, my second was when I worked for Road Trippers. I used to go out to Rockabilly on the Route. So
okay.
I've been
Mhm.
fortunate to, I know the Roadrunner. I know they're a good friend of the show, and I actually met David the day that they signed the papers to buy it. So kind of a neat. So I've been to Tucumcari a lot over the years, and our trips uh, this year we always go through there, stop and do a tour of the Blue Swallow, a tour of the Roadrunner, spend a little time, going to Flora Maze and some of the gifts, TP Curios, things like that. And then next year on our alumni tours, we're going to stay at the Roadrunner, which I'm very excited. And then for those alumni tours, we will actually go through Las Vegas on our way to Santa Fe. Right now, our regular standard trip goes straight to Albuquerque, and then we do a day trip to Santa Fe and take the Turquoise Trail back.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Yeah, David Brenner has done a marvelous job with the Roadrunner Lodge. It's an interesting property. Two motels, a 1940s motel tied to a 1960s motel. The way they did that in the 60s. David's done some great things with that because that was really a condemned
yeah.
eyesore of a property, and he's transformed it. He's added some really neat 1960s type tiki rooms that are pretty
It,
impressive.
yeah, his vision, the way he decorates those theme rooms, just phenomenal vision.
Yeah,
And his own little radio station that plays oldies with vintage, ads. He definitely knows how to make it feel period correct.
yeah.
He really does a marvelous job.
And Tucumcari, it's one of those places when you come in, especially on the east side, west side of town. It looks like a scene out of an apocalyptic movie. It's not very welcoming, but that town is really got some spirit. Connie Loveland there with Tucumcari Main Street works out of the depot, and there are some amazing things there. The Mesa Lands Community College Dinosaur Museum.
Hmm.
That's just absolutely mind-boggling to have a museum of that quality in a small town.
Yeah, absolutely.
They do some really interesting paleontology digs that you can be a part of during the summer. I'll put some information up on that. And going up to Vegas, Highway 104 out of Tucumcari to Las Vegas, that is probably one of my top drives in the state of New Mexico. That is a spectacular drive.
Yeah, and I think, well, you and I were talking about this summer. I was reading a book about Kit Carson, and people don't realize that back in the day, Las Vegas was much nicer than Santa Fe.
Yeah,
Santa Fe was considered like the ugly kind of stepchild, and if you wanted to be somewhere, Las Vegas was where it was at, not Santa Fe. In fact, Fred Harvey had some of his finest hotels there in Las Vegas. They kept burning down, but I think almost every one of his hotels, it seems like, burned down once. When everything's made of wood and everybody's smoking indoors all the time, it's going to happen.
well, and
Um,
the locomotives too, the coal centers,
oh,
and
yeah, everything. But yeah, it's if you want some interesting history just about how that whole area, the Santa Fe, Las Vegas, that whole area up there just has such fascinating history in terms of how many different countries and tribes and things like that had parts of that area. It's really um, really fascinating.
yeah, I really that 1937 alignment up through Santa Fe and that little detour to Las Vegas. I was talking to Bill Hendrickson up there in Las Vegas recently on a project. He was the economic development director, and I was really surprised by this because the town is about 12,000 people. They have almost 2,000 buildings on the National Register of Historic Places.
Oh, wow.
Pretty astounding. You talk about cultures and countries and history that Pecos National Historic Park along Route 66 between Las Vegas and Santa Fe. When the Spanish arrived, that was the largest city they had encountered north of Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Uh, that's a pretty interesting place. Austin, thank you so much, for doing this. I look forward to seeing you this year, and I always look forward to visiting with your groups. And I'm eager to see what unfolds this year as we build up to the centennial. I think it's going to get interesting. There's a lot of neat things happening in Kingman and other communities along Route 66, so it's got the makings.
Yeah, and I always like to tell people it's been 10 years of me doing 66 in one shape or another, and every year it has improved. Um, you lose some stuff. There's stuff that unfortunately we lose just people to the passage of time, and some of the properties, we end up losing. But I've seen so much in terms of communities embracing it. Um, it has improved every year that I've done it. So I'm sure it will continue to improve, especially for the centennial.
Yeah, it's great. You have room, you still, for some people to show up for next year?
So 2025, we just had we were almost sold out for this coming tour season. Just had a handful of cancellations from some international folks. So I do have space left this year on a trip in June and a trip in September. And then for 2026, um, 2026, all of our dates still have space. Most of the dates are about 20% full at this point, so still
Okay.
lots of space for 2026. I do tell people I think by the time we get to the fall, 2025, I was sold out, almost sold out by March. So I really think by the fall, 2026 is going to start to really be full. So I tell people start trying to think if somebody signs up for 26 and the date ends up not working and they need to switch to another date, I can typically accommodate that. But I tell people we're only going to get one shot to do it in 2026. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I don't imagine many people that take the centennial trip along Route 66 will be here for the bicentennial trip along Route 66. But
you're probably right. I think probably unlikely.
uh, your website is the number two, laneamerica.com. If people would like to a great Route 66 excursion.
And I always, like I said, I'm not a good sales guy. If anybody, my contact information's on there. I get a lot of emails from people. Hey, I've got a old car that I just want to do a day in Oklahoma. Can you tell me some ideas? Sure. So I tell people, you and I both, uh, and other people we know, we just are ambassadors of this wonderful road, and we'll help you any way we can.
Well, it's a team effort. That's the way I look at it. If we're here to make things a little better for other people, that's the whole idea here. And if my focus is just on making $1 million, that's all I care about. If I make $1 million, I'm still broke. The idea,
Yeah, yeah.
the idea is to help people and encourage them and make things a little better. And that's another thing that sets you apart. Your willingness to help people. But if they're looking for a great adventure, Southern Michigan museums, Route 66, they really need to get a hold of you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on, Jim. Always
I
great to talk to you.
Yeah, I look forward to it, and I've really looked forward to this conversation, and I've got some text messages that come in about trips. If you're looking for a good Canadian road trip, I've got some good friends there. Route Trip USA, that's their website, routetripusa.com. They do American custom tours on the coast, San Francisco, and but they really have a big focus on bespoke, customized road trips in Canada. And about New Orleans, I've got some questions here on New Orleans. Uh, I would recommend if you're interested in Mississippi River country. And sounds odd, but it's a company out of New Zealand, Gilligan's Route 66 Tours. They do a really first class, like Austin does, a trip from Minneapolis to New Orleans, or vice versa. And Gilligan's, it's not as bad as it sounds. Like the 3 hour cruise thing. They actually put on a pretty good show. And of course, we got some great, Route 66 is all about time travel, like the Roadrunner Lodge, the time capsules. Connie Eccles at the Wagon Wheel Motel. That's another one. You got to at least stop. Even it's best if you spend the night, but even if you don't spend the night, you got to experience the Wagon Wheel
Yeah,
Motel.
Connie's always kind enough. We go there around lunchtime, and she will show us some rooms and open up her gift shop. And I know a lot of my guests, if they're traveling back home, they'll actually try to spend the night because it's a really special property.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That's a 1930s kind of time capsule. Angela Moreland, she is doing a fantastic job in putting McLean, Texas back together. In fact, she's running for mayor of McLean, Texas, and she's put together the Cactus Inn Motel, 1950s property, which is next to the wonderful Red River Steakhouse. And then she's opened up, for lack of a better word, it's kind of bizarre, a tap room downtown in McLean that I do recommend. That's pretty neat. And then, of course, Vicky Ashcraft. Do you ever stop there at the Enchanted Trails?
Yeah. Well, I take that back. I have been there, but we don't stop on our trips. But I always point it out to people because it's a hidden gem. I have
Yeah.
friends in Albuquerque that they used to go. That was where they always threw birthday parties. They would get a
Yeah.
bunch of friends together and go rent the trailers. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful property.
Yeah, she doesn't rent the trailers anymore. She's gotten up. Yeah, it has an interesting history. It's actually the Enchanted Trails Trading Post. It was started out as a trading post in the 1940s. And when they realigned the highway, the trading post wasn't really cut off, but it wasn't in a good location the way it was set up. So they literally moved the trading post to the other side of the highway and being creative. But Vicky has kept some of the old trailers open as exhibits. And she's expanded on her collection of Hudson automobiles there with the travel trailers, and put together just a gigantic hubcap Christmas tree for a photo op. Speaking of quirky attractions, and Vicky, like you and like me, she's really being associated president of the Route 66 Association of New Mexico for years, and she has a passion. She's pretty good at telling people where to go too, so it makes a great stop. Uh, Austin, I want to appreciate this a lot. Uh, I can't. I just really looked forward to this conversation, encouraging people to get out there and do some traveling.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
We're going to do something a little different next week. How many people are familiar with mead or a meadery? This is kind of different. Uh, I had being a history buff, I knew what mead was. And that'll be your homework assignment, folks, before next week, is to discover what mead is. But a fascinating young man here. His wife started Laughlin Tours, working with the casinos out of Laughlin and doing regional tours here a couple of years ago. But Matt Young he's a young fella. He's probably in his early 40s. He started a meadery on Route 66 here in Kingman in a 1930s service station. It's a different sort of business, to say the least. His specialty is he makes his own mead and some hard apple cider. Yeah, so we'll have a good conversation next week. Austin, I hope you get rid of that head cold.
I appreciate it.
And Margaret will probably be reaching out to you from the R.E. Olds Museum there in East Lansing.
Yeah, I
I
hope
know,
so.
I know,
Absolutely.
I know Margaret. She's always looking for. She's always a welcoming host. She likes to encourage people to come visit. They got some
Absolutely.
pretty interesting stuff going there. Well, my friends, I want to thank everybody who joined us today, and well, we'll do this again next week. We got a lot of neat stuff coming up. We're going to talk to Wade Brave pretty soon. I'll have that on the schedule. He is the organizer of the AAA Route 66 Road Fest in Tulsa in June, a first-rate event and festival that I highly recommend. Michael Wallace is scheduled to be speaking this year, and as far as I know, I'll be there as well, beating my gums and telling stories. Jim Featherstone is going to be with us in a couple weeks talking about internet security for small businesses, the importance of having functioning websites, secure website, and secure emails, all the things we need to kind of know today in today's world. And we're going to have Mr. Schwartz with us as well. He is an acclaimed photographer, spent quite a few years documenting Route 66 and Roadside America. Uh, he works a lot with Route Magazine and other publications. He has a gallery. We'll be talking to him as well. So we've got some interesting stuff coming down the pike, my friends. But until we meet again, I'll bid you adios. A little bit of music from Joe and Woody and the boys of the road crew. And we'll get this published up on, be on Spotify this afternoon. And the archived programs are always available on our Podbean website page, Coffee with Jim. And we offer website designers, by the way, the code for an embedded player for archived programs, anyone who's interested. We currently have it on several websites, including The Bee, the largest tri-state media source in Colorado River Valley, and Kingman Tours and a few other websites. Of course, you can find links to at the Jim Hinckley's America website. Austin, again, thank you, and you take care of yourself, and we'll see you in May.
In May, yeah. See you real soon, Jim. Thanks for having me.
You bet, my friend. Well, adios. We will send you off with some road trip inspiration music from Joe and Woody and the boys of the road crew. Until we meet again, my friends. Vaya con Dios.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a 2-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.